Hi, everyone, and welcome to the lineup. Today is June the 20th, 2024. I'm Barry Stagner. Thank you for joining us again this evening. And once again, we've got just a series of stories that relate to Bible prophecy, and it's pretty exciting what's developing, even though it's difficult to watch and see. But I wanted to maybe open with something many of you actually asked me to do rather frequently. I've got a special guest here inside the studio. Come here, bub. Here, Louis. Come here. Come here. Come on. Here we go. Come here. Up. Come up. Say hi. Come up. Come on. Come here, bub. Let me get him up here. There he is. There he is. Before I started, he was all over licking the mic, and there we go. There's my boy. So, for those of you who've been asking about how Louie's doing, well, as you see, he's doing well, getting bigger and bigger, and just really, he's a blast. Well, as we continue to watch things unfold in Israel, it's just really an amazing thing. And I know I'm pretty sure most of you saw the little brief update that Amir gave yesterday, and very sobering. And just considering the things that they are facing there in Israel, and an attack for Amir and his family, especially an attack from the north, is a whole different ballgame than an attack from the south or something in the Gaza area. And knowing that in Lebanon, Hezbollah has hundreds of thousands of missiles and rockets and drones and anti-tank weaponry and smart devices that aren't just dumb bombs. Aren't just launching a missile hoping it lands and hits a target. They're actually guided ordinances, and so it's a very concerning time. And I think one of the most chilling things that Amir shared was that he had called the Connect staff together in that beautiful facility that they built over there, and let them know that it's quite possible that Connect could be impacted by some of the assaults and attacks that are going on, or scheduled at least, by the Hezbollah and Nasrallah, and a lot of the just rhetoric that's coming out of there, and the fact that they've included, and we'll talk more about this later, but included Cyprus if they get involved and allow Israel to launch any aircraft from any of the bases located there, that there will be retaliation. And so things are escalating without question. And this is exactly what we would expect. And I did a program yesterday with Jan Markell that should air in a couple of weeks. And one of the things that she brought up, and a word she used, is a fitting word for what's going on today. And she mentioned convergence. And the interesting thing about that is what is happening is that the things that relate to Bible prophecy, there's not this potentially developing over there and this thing over here, possibly leading to something. All the things that Jesus talked about in Matthew 24:3-8 are advancing simultaneously, and they're all converging together and moving toward what is going to be ultimately fulfilled during the tribulation. And, again, I think we always need to keep in mind that the tribulation, the whole of the tribulation, is God's wrath. There's no God's wrath starts at the abomination of desolation or any of those other things. God's wrath starts immediately in the form of allowing the Antichrist to rise to power, which kicks off the tribulation, according to Revelation 6:2. We also know that the hindering force of the Holy Spirit has to be taken out of the way, allowing him to rise to power, which implies a couple of things. God is in complete control over world circumstances as far as intervening when he's deciding to and when he's predicted that he will. And of course, we know that, mankind is in a fallen state. Satan is referred to as the god of this world. But ultimately, and I see this out there a lot on social media platforms all of a sudden, the Bible doesn't say God is in control. Well, it's certainly implied. And he has told us everything that's going to happen, the natural order of events and the course of things throughout human history. And he's also told us when he's going to step in. He's going to defend Israel, according to Zechariah 12-14, and he will fight as he fights in the day of battle. We know Jesus is going to come back, according to Revelation 19:11-16, and he's going to come with a robe dipped in blood, and he's going to make war against his enemies and everyone whose name is not written in the book of life, and he will absolutely be victorious. But remember, in all these things we're watching, it's going to reach a transition point where the focal point of the world shifts from the church age to the 70th week of Daniel. Now, it's quite likely and maybe even necessary that there be some type of gap between the rapture of the church and the beginning of the tribulation, as the geopolitical platform of the world is going to change dramatically. Certain places will be missing so many people, they will basically be ineffective in operating as a government, or anything else within its economic system is going to be impacted. So there will be most likely some type of gap between when that man of sin, the son of perdition, rises to power, comes riding into the world like a good guy on a white horse, as Revelation 6:2 says, having a covenant, a bow in his hand. And remember, the bow symbolizes a covenant in Genesis, where the Lord hung his bow in the sky, reminding him of the covenant he made never to destroy the world with flood water again. So we have an Old Testament precedent for a bow signifying a covenant. And the Antichrist is going to come with the covenant made with many for 1 week, for the final week of the 70, determined for Daniel's people in the holy city. And thus things will kick off. And that actually is an act of God's wrath. Um, it's not his vengeance in the sense of catastrophic events, but it's his wrath in the sense of him allowing this man of sin, who's going to kill thousands and millions, most likely, during the tribulation period, and commit the abomination of desolation and all these other things. This too is the consequential wrath of God. So again, we are getting so close, and as much as the difficulty that we have in watching things happen, and please be praying for Amir and his family. He's got one of his sons is in Gaza in the IDF, and we need to be praying for him. And all three of his four kids are in the military, active duty right now. So just keep him, and of course praying for the peace of Jerusalem, that the people of Israel would come to know the Prince of Peace, which will be the end result of the tribulation we know. So, well, let's jump into our stories. And there's much going on, and I'm sure some of you have heard some of the talk back and forth between the U.S. administration and Benjamin Netanyahu. And the Jewish News Syndicate reports, and there was some consternation on the part of the White House for a comment that Benjamin Netanyahu made about withholding weapons and ammunition from Israel, not allowing them to fight with everything at their disposal. And the White House denied it, said it's a fantasy and all that. But the White House delays F-15 sale to Israel despite the congressional okay, which, by the way, is illegal. The Jewish News Syndicate reports the White House is holding up delivery of a fleet of F-15 jet fighters to Israel. And the $18 billion sale of 50 fighter planes is one of the largest arms deals with Israel in recent years, according to the Wall Street Journal. The sale has been delayed by two of four congressional leaders needed to sign off on major arms deals, but they removed their objections on May 22nd. The next step was for the State Department to formally notify lawmakers about the sale. The administration hasn't done that yet, White House and congressional officials said, according to the Journal. The State Department denied it was holding up the sale, with an official telling the Journal there is no policy guidance to slow down transfers in Israel. Well, I would say not signing off and notifying Congress is doing exactly that. The State Department official added, however, we are looking tactically at the timing. It's not a question of whether, it's a question of when. Well, delivering them after all of this is basically forcing your particular interpretation as to how things ought to go on the nation of Israel, and not allowing them to use in this current battle the weapons, the $18 billion worth of arms that they bought. And believe me, the F-15 is a weapon. Referring to last week's Israel visit by Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in a social media post on Tuesday, told the Biden administration to stop slow walking the delivery of vital arms for Israel's war effort. When Secretary Blinken was recently here in Israel, we had a candid conversation. I said it's inconceivable that in the past few months, the administration has been withholding weapons and ammunition to Israel, Netanyahu said. Netanyahu told Blinken during the June 10th meeting that Israel would fight even without U.S. support, but that the arms embargo gave Iran-backed Hamas and Hezbollah a strategic edge, raising the chances of a prolonged multi-front war in the Middle East. And asked about Netanyahu's remarks on Tuesday, Blinken didn't refer to the F-15 sale, saying that a single shipment of 2,000-pound bombs remains under review, but all the other arms deliveries are moving forward. Netanyahu the ambassador to Israel, Jack Lew, informed Netanyahu that the ammunition and weapons that he had referred to in the video are in the process of being delivered to Israel. And the White House, miffed by Netanyahu's comments, reportedly called off a scheduled strategic dialogue on Iran between Israeli and U.S. officials in Washington. And in early May, Biden officials announced the administration would withhold the bombs delivery due to its opposition to a large-scale ground offensive in Rafah, and the last Hamas stronghold. And we'll talk more about what the progress looks like in Rafah at this point in time in a moment. But we have to remember that, Israel is going to finally become a burdensome stone to all nations, and whatever nations will exist at the time of the tribulation period, and finally leading to the whole world being against Israel. And we certainly see that we're moving in that direction today. So pardon me just one moment. It's hot in here. Almost summer here in SoCal, or maybe today's the first day of summer. I'm not sure what the date is, but I had to turn my fan on. Well, the Algeminer reports that Blinken confirms U.S. pausing bomb shipment to Israel after Netanyahu calls for end of inconceivable weapons halt. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Tuesday confirmed the U.S. was still withholding a shipment of bombs to Israel hours after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called for Washington to remove restrictions on arms deliveries to the Jewish state, and asserted that the top American diplomat had assured him the Biden administration was working to lift any halts on weapons. The Biden administration is, quote, continuing to review, end quote, one shipment that President Joe Biden has talked about with regard to 2,000-pound bombs, like we mentioned a moment ago, and their use because of concerns of their use in densely populated areas like Rafah. That remains under review. However, he added the administration is committed to making sure that Israel has what it needs to effectively defend itself. And once again, we talked a little last week about the Genesis 12:3 thing, that the Lord will bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse Israel. And that still stands. And a lot of people like to call that into question. But truth of the matter is, we are watching biblical Israel moving toward that time period where all Israel is going to be saved. And all Israel, according to Zechariah chapter 12 or 13 rather, is going to be saved, because 2/3 of the Jews are going to die during the tribulation, and God is going to supernaturally protect those who believe. And at the second coming, Zechariah 12:10 will be fulfilled. They will look upon the one whom they pierced and mourn for him as one mourns for an only son. And once again, at that point in time, they will believe that the Holy One of Israel is none other than Jesus of Nazareth, the Savior of the whole world. So, and he will be seen finally also as the object of Isaiah chapter 53, the one who was wounded for our transgressions and bruised for our iniquities, and the chastisement of our peace was laid upon him. And, that's great news in light of the fact that the chapter also says, all we like sheep have gone astray. Aren't you glad God saves wandering sheep. And I love what Luke says, talking about, how God operates and that he's kind to the unthankful and the evil. And I think the ultimate act of kindness is sending his son into the world. As a matter of fact, if you look back in Genesis, where we're told Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, the Hebrew word there is chen, Chen, and the word means to stoop to an inferior in kindness. And God has stooped to humankind who rebelled against him, sinned against him, rejected the only command or disobeyed the one command he gave to the first couple that he created in his own likeness and image. And he has stooped down to us through his son so we could be lifted up above his wrath and spend eternity with him. God is so good. And by the way, let me pause for a moment. And I was asking Pastor Mike Olay about one of the people that I've asked you to pray for, Steve Yohn, who is co-writes the fictional books that he and Amir put together, and this series of books that are a great read if you're into, military type stuff. And the last one is even a bit of a romance novel, interestingly. But, I think one of the great things is when I talked to Steve Yohn prior to, we texted back and forth, and prior to his surgery, and he said, I've got a great doctor and an even greater God. And Pastor Michael Lay told me that he is doing remarkably well, even though the progress is slow. He had, not sure exactly what the surgery was, probably a valve replacement or something, but he had major heart surgery. And Mike shared that he's doing great. So please keep praying. My sister's doing well, continues to do well. So please keep praying for her. Little Elena, she's fighting and battling, and this just seems to be a roller coaster ride for them and that the family that's long been a part of our lives. So please keep praying for Elena and my longtime friend Mark Rank too. Pray for him as he battles stage 4 colon cancer. So again, and I'm so glad to see so many of you commenting about the prayer needs that you have, so we can all get on board and pray for those that you have concerns about and need God's touch on their lives. Our God is all powerful and he is almighty. Newsmax reports that the White House cancels a meeting with Israel over Netanyahu's path. We actually covered this a moment ago, but the White House reportedly canceled the meeting with Israel after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed the U.S. was withholding military aid in a video message. Well, they are. I mean, Blinken said it. And the meeting was scheduled for Thursday to discuss Iran, but top advisors to President Joe Biden were enraged by the video, according to Axios. This decision made it clear that there are consequences for pulling such stunts, a U.S. official told Axios. Now, again, this is where the Genesis 12:3 comes in, because we need to be a support to Israel's right to exist. It doesn't mean we agree with every decision that they make. It doesn't mean that they're not going to even make mistakes in the midst of all this. But we do need to be supportive of them nationally and individually. And it's I know it's been very troubling to Amir and really the rest of the Jewish community, Messianic Jewish community especially, I think, to see so much hatred being expressed. We've got a story at the end of our time together tonight that shows how far exactly that goes here in the United States. Now, the decision, again, as the article said, makes it clear that there are consequences for such statements like Netanyahu made. But the interesting thing about this is, our administration is trying to control Israel. Well, we don't want you using this. We don't want you using that. We don't want you doing this. We don't want you going there. And you know what? Israel is not a puppet of the United States. It's an independent country. It's a sovereign nation, and they have every right to defend themselves. And, unfortunately, this particular administration doesn't think it's important to defend your own country. Just open the borders, let whoever wants to come in. And now we're having all kinds of repercussions, as is much of the rest of the world who've practiced that open border immigration policy. And, the interesting thing about this article is that, the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, said that they have provided Israel with billions of dollars in weapons and had only paused one weapon shipment. Well, what about the F-15s? I'd say the F-15s are pretty crucial, especially if war breaks out on the northern border. And she wanted to say, we genuinely do not know what he is talking about. I think that needs to be rephrased, that we genuinely do not know what we're talking about, speaking of the administration. And again, just watching these things happen and the delusional thinking and the people in places of power, just being basically clueless, flies in the face of much of what is being presented here in the United States and elsewhere around the world. Where people are, well, we want peace. We want the Palestinians to be free and all these things, and yet somehow, even just being some 7-8 months ago, people have forgotten who started this. And they act as though Israel has no right to finish it. And, we have to remember that this is a long chain of attacks on the nation of Israel by a group that seeks their destruction, by the same group that has in their textbooks in every grade level of school, a map of the Middle East does not have Israel in it. They're not into a two-state solution. They want one state, a Palestinian state, and the elimination of all Jews from the river, the Jordan, to the sea, the Mediterranean, and everything in between, which constitutes the landmass known as the nation of Israel. Now, the Times of Israel is reporting that Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, says there is no place in Israel that would be safe in war and threatens to target Cyprus. The head of Lebanon's Hezbollah terror group said Wednesday that nowhere in Israel would be safe if a full-fledged war breaks out between the two foes, while also threatening Cyprus and other parts of the Mediterranean. Speaking at a ceremony commemorating slain Hezbollah senior commander Talib Abdullah, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike in southern Lebanon last week, alongside 3 other operatives, Nasrallah commented on the escalating conflict with the Jewish state and said the Shiite terror group does not want total war, but is only acting in support of Hamas. Again, another Iranian proxy, Hamas and Hezbollah, both financed and supplied by the Iranians. Hezbollah has been attacking northern Israel since October 8th, leading to Israeli reprisals and an escalating conflict Israel has increasingly warned could spark open war. Now, were Israel to launch a large-scale offensive against the Lebanese terror group, it must prepare for attacks from the ground, the air, and the sea, and the situation in the Mediterranean will change completely, Nasrallah vowed. No place in Israel would be spared from the group's weapons in case of a full-blown war, Nasrallah warned, saying Hezbollah will fight with no rules and no ceilings, and adding, the enemy knows well that we have prepared ourselves for the worst, and that no place will be spared from our rockets. Israel knows that what also awaits it in the Mediterranean is very big, Nasrallah added, without elaborating, possibly insinuating the group could attack its offshore gas rigs. Nasrallah also threatened Cyprus for the first time, saying it had been allowing Israel to use its airports and bases for military exercises, and that Hezbollah could consider it a part of the war and strike it if it were to allow the IDF to use logistical infrastructure in the country to attack Lebanon. Opening Cypriot airports and bases to the Israeli enemy to target Lebanon would mean that the Cypriot government is part of the war, and the resistance will deal with it as part of the war, he said. Now, all of this is interesting because we do know, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, that the weapons within the arsenal of Hezbollah are far different than those of Hamas. All the guided weaponry, the smart missiles and rockets and things of that nature that are GPS directed and precision guided to specific targets, numbering in the tens of thousands, and hundreds of thousands for just the general weaponry, the drones, and all the other things that we know about that are within their arsenal. And I think there, as we watch these things unfold, there is a possibility that there could be an escalation to the degree that leads to other countries jumping in, joining Lebanon, especially with the anti-Semitism growing around the world, the hatred of the Jews, which is just beyond mysterious to me on multiple levels, outside of the fact that it's spiritual in nature. But this could potentially lead up to Syria getting involved, well, not directly, but they being on the other northern border of the nation of Israel, they also being home to a military presence of Russia, the Persians or Iran, as well as Turkey. There could be some type of response there with that military hardware in close proximity to Israel, much like Lebanon is on their northern border. And that could cause the destruction of Damascus, which I think is most likely the catalyst for the Ezekiel invasion. Damascus being destroyed, Isaiah 17:1, becoming a ruinous heap, meaning it will be uninhabitable ever again. No one will live there. And what that means could be, a nuclear strike and staying away, much like with Chernobyl. It becomes an area that's isolated from human activity. And, because of the radioactivity, that's the aftermath of a nuclear strike, be it limited or whatever it could be. It could be chemical weapons cache that's stored there that gets exploded by an Israeli rocket or whatever. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. But, I think one of the things that we can see from what's happened since October 7th is that, and, we had September 11th, 2001 was the same type of event where just in a day we get out of bed or we go to sleep the night before living in one world and get up in the morning living in a completely different world. Things change dramatically, and that could happen with this. Something could happen that ignites the Middle East powder keg and the fuse is lit. Israel, finds out that Iran has shipped a dirty bomb or something into Syria, somewhere around the city of Damascus, and Israel strikes that weapons cache or truck or whatever it is that's delivering it or airplane, and next thing you know, you've got a nuclear explosion there in the city. But again, it doesn't have to be nuclear, but it does seem to imply that something happens there that makes the city, I don't know if this is even a word, but unrebuildable and cannot be restored to a city status, even though the city claims to be the longest continuously inhabited city in the whole of the world. There's a couple others that make that claim, but there is a 4,500-year history of the habitation of the city of Damascus. So, these things I think on the prophetic level are all important for us to see as potentials, even though, we've seen in time past that things heat up and slow down and heat up and slow down. But we have to remember that there's going to be a time where the advancement of the prophetic narrative reaches an irreversible state and is moving forward to its foretold end. And I personally believe that we're there. I just don't see how things can be reversed and for there to be, another 100 or 200 years of things being the way they are. Morally, the world is in the condition that it was in the days of Noah. The thoughts and intents of people's hearts are only evil continually. Violence is filling the earth. The world is corrupt before God, and there are relatively few righteous in comparative numbers to the unrighteous in the world. And like Paul said, what part of what makes the perilous times perilous in the last days in 2 Timothy 3:1-5 is that people hate God. And we see that just, it's unbelievable to even consider that, but it's happening all over the place. And, one of the things I think to remember, especially in the Hebrew, when, we hear about, Jacob I have loved and Esau I have hated. And, that word means to become an enemy or treat like an enemy. And, that's exactly how people view God today. Like he's an enemy. He's trying to destroy the right to enjoy life and impose on humanity all these restrictions that they find to be offensive. Well, that's not God at all. He who the Son sets free is free indeed. And yet here we have a world that is anti-God, anti-church, and just, it's incredible to see so many, especially young Americans, supporting Hamas and quoting and reciting these just heinous chants against the Jews. Well, DPA International, which is actually a German website, says Israel says Rafah offensive goals are nearly achieved. And the Israeli military, the article says, will soon have achieved its aims in the offensive in Rafah. Half of the combat units of the militant Palestinian organization, which governed Gaza prior to the war that broke out in October, have been destroyed, the army says. Some 60 to 70% of the territory of the city in the southern Gaza Strip is under the operational control of Israeli troops, the army said on Monday. It would only take a few more weeks before the military operation in the city is completed, the army went on to say. Israel's army launched the operation in Rafah, which lies on the border with Egypt at the beginning of May, and the declared aim was to dismantle the last Hamas combat units. The offensive was highly controversial internationally because more than 1 million Palestinians were in Rafah at the time. Most of them had fled there from other parts of the Gaza to escape the war. Almost all of these people have now fled from the city to an area to the west where they are finding it difficult to get supplies. And, there's another story. I did not include it tonight because I think most people have heard it. But there's U.S. has reached a conclusion, as have others in the international community, that there's no famine going on in Gaza and that much of the food is making it through and people are receiving supplies despite the efforts of Hamas. And even we've seen some videos of Hamas shooting people in the legs for eating the food from the relief packages that are coming in through Israel. And according to unverified army reports on Monday, Israeli troops killed around 550 Hamas fighters in 40 days of fighting in Rafah. 22 of their own soldiers also were lost in the fighting. And in the course of the operation, they found an extensive system of tunnels, as well as large quantities of weapons and explosives. At least 25 underground tunnels are said to run under the border with Egypt, and this information likewise cannot currently be independently verified. But by taking control of the so-called Philadelphia corridor, a narrow strip of land running along the Gaza side of the border with Egypt, Israel has greatly increased its control over what goes in and out of Gaza. And although Egypt denies it, in the Gaza Strip, it was an open secret that goods ranging from everyday necessities to luxury goods were being smuggled through tunnels on which Hamas then levied customs duties. All about the money and control. The Times of Israel reports a very heart-wrenching story, and that is that U.S. officials estimate that as few as 50 of the remaining 120 hostages are still alive. And this comes initially from the Wall Street Journal. And the U.S. officials estimate that of the 116 hostages believed to be held by Hamas in Gaza, just 50 are still alive. And the Wall Street Journal reports. The assessment, based on a combination of Israeli and U.S. intelligence, puts the number of deceased hostages at 66. Far higher than the number that Israel has publicly confirmed. And the IDF has confirmed the death of 41 hostages still in captivity based on intelligence and findings obtained by the troops in Gaza. Speaking to the Wall Street Journal, the head of the medical team for the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, Haggai Levine, says there is cause to be extremely worried. And it seems like every week more hostages are dying or getting in danger or are very sick, he says. Now, we know that the International War Crime Commission at The Hague has charged Israel with war crimes, but I haven't seen anything about this. This is a violation to kill prisoners just indiscriminately. And yet that's what Hamas is doing. But, it's kind of like a lot of what we see here with groups like Antifa in the United States. Many in the progressive world system see this as justified rage. And, it's just unreal, the world that we live in today. The Times of Israel reports that North Korean deal with Russia requires use of all military means without delay in case of war. And a new agreement between Russia and North Korea, reached by their leaders, requires the countries to use all available means to provide immediate military assistance in the event of war, North Korean state media says. The North's official Korean Central News Agency reports the language of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement reached by its leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Pyongyang on Wednesday. The agency says Article 4 of the agreement states that if one of the countries gets invaded and is pushed into a state of war, the other must deploy all means at its disposal without delay to provide military and other assistance. And the deal could mark the strongest connection between Moscow and Pyongyang since the end of the Cold War, and both Kim and Putin described it as a major upgrade of their relations, covering security, trade, investment, cultural, and humanitarian ties. And the summit came as the U.S. and its allies have expressed growing concerns over a possible arms arrangement in which Pyongyang provides Moscow with badly needed munitions for its war in Ukraine in exchange for economic assistance and technology transfers that could enhance the threat posed by Kim's nuclear weapons and missile program. Well, interesting how we see the polarizing of East and West, and any westernized nations, and here you've got these communistic, or even with Putin's case, dictatorial type forms of rulership, even though they claim to be a democracy, all the fixed elections and all the things we see going on there. And people are positioning themselves for what's going to take place during the tribulation period. And again, we have to be getting close. It just seems reasonable. And, we don't know the day or the hour, and it's just silly to try and calculate a particular day or say, well, it's going to happen at this season of the year. We don't know. But what we do know is that Jesus rebuked the Pharisees for not recognizing the signs of his first coming. And therefore, that implies that the signs of his return, first for the church and second with the church, 7 years later, ought to be recognizable by those who are in tune with his word. And that's why it's such a mystery today that so many, and let me just say this, it's not just so many, it's the vast majority of pastors out there won't talk about Bible prophecy or the lateness of the hour or anything else. Most of that is caused by the fact that they don't believe that modern Israel is biblical Israel, and the church has replaced Israel, which to me, the question that immediately comes to mind is that if modern Israel is not biblical Israel, then why are all the things the Bible said would happen to Israel happening to modern Israel? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Modern Israel is biblical Israel. The Lord said he would bring them back into the land after he himself scatters them among the nations, and he will bring them back in the land for his name's sake, that he might receive glory. And much like with Egypt and other nations that God has dealt with throughout the course of history, that they may know that he is the Lord. And this is going to be proven quite handily during the tribulation period. And yet, I think, when you look at some of the language, the multiple times where, people curse God and do not repent, even though they know. And Revelation 6, we're told that they call on the mountains and the rocks to hide them from the wrath of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. These people know that God is judging them, and yet they don't care. They don't repent. They want nothing to do with God. It's such a deep-seated hatred. Now, are we in such times? Obviously, I think we are, that people just do not want God telling them what to do. They hate him to the degree that they'd rather pray to the earth to hide them from the one who made the heavens and the earth. Now let's switch gears a little bit here and talk about some of the things that indicate that the moral decline of the world is just basically hit bottom. And Fox News reports, and the headline reads, Pandora's Box of Polyamory. Child marriage is possible under proposed California amendment. And of course, California has to lead the way in this degradation of morality. A pro-family California organization is warning that a proposed state constitutional amendment to eliminate the traditional definition of marriage from state law could potentially open up a Pandora's box to legitimize polyamorous, incestuous, and child marriages. Assembly Constitutional Amendment 5, ACA 5, which aims to repeal Proposition 8's language that states marriage is only between a man and a woman, was introduced by Democratic State Senator Scott Wiener, of course, and Assembly member Evan Lowe to protect same-sex marriages. If passed, in its place, the state constitution would provide that the right to marry is a fundamental right. However, the California Family Council, a conservative advocacy group, believes the wording of ACA 5 is too open-ended and will lead to the normalization of non-traditional marriage structures that could harm children's development. In a society like ours, you can never count on what people are willing to do for legal and financial and political reasons, CFC President Jonathan Keller told Fox News in an interview. And ACA 5, again, eliminates any of those safeguards, and it opens up Pandora's box. You could have siblings getting married. You could have nephews and nieces marrying uncles and aunts. You could have potentially even mothers and fathers marrying each other, or mothers and children, or fathers and children marrying each other, he went on to say. Excuse me. There goes that. The fans get me again. And following Prop 8's passage in 2008, the measure faced legal challenges and a refusal by state officials to defend it, effectively suspending the legislation. Although it remains part of the Constitution, it has not been enforceable for over a decade, Keller said. And after Roe v. Wade was overturned in the summer of 2022, California Democrats decided to revisit the law's language out of fear it would go into effect. And that's how we got this new initiative, Keller said, of ACA 5. Pardon me. The concern comes as the Oakland City Council approved polyamorous relationships in April, protecting diverse family structures from discrimination. The Berkeley City Council passed a similar proposal in May, paving the way for more recognition of non-traditional relationships in the Bay Area. And again, the moral slide that we see happening today just reaches new levels, seemingly almost on a daily basis. And it's just amazing to see so many people support those who author such bills. And it's tragic. And again, California seems to want to take point on this debauchery and promoting these things. And Lord have mercy. The Christian Post says Supreme Court's decision on abortion drugs is a wake-up call for church leaders. The U.S. Supreme Court's decision in the U.S. Food and Drug Administration versus Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine is a disappointing setback in the fight to protect women's health and well-being. It's also a wake-up call about the need for moral clarity within the church on the issue of abortion. There was I'm not sure what denomination she was associated with, but I've seen several times a clip of a woman in a frock, a preacher's frock, saying that if Jesus were here today, he would add to the Beatitudes, blessed are those who end the life of their child in the womb. I mean, can you just think that's almost the equivalent of probably the most heinous statement that I've ever heard from a state official or a government official in the United States of America. And it was made by Barack Obama when he said, God bless Planned Parenthood. There are no blessings for Planned Parenthood, but I assure you, lest they repent individually, there is something coming for them, and it's not a blessing. And yet here, we have this type of thing happening and people voting in people like Scott Wiener just year after year after year. And, we've got another uh, effort to recall Gavin Newsom, who we're in deep trouble here financially. I think it's a $17 billion deficit where, just a few years ago, we had, our ink was black and not red to the tune of, again, several $billion, maybe almost, I think it was like 20 or $25 billion. And now we've made almost a $50 billion swing into a deficit category. And yet, what does he want to do? Well, part of it he blames on all the electronic vehicles that are running here in California, and not buying gas is greatly diminished the, I think it's 75 or 80 cent gas tax with every gallon of gas. And so the coffers are taking a hit because of these electric vehicles. And here we are, we're coming up to summer, and we're soon going to be told, I think a day after tomorrow, it's going to be 85 here in SoCal and hotter in other areas that aren't quite as close to the beach. But what are we going to be told to do? Well, don't run your appliances during the day. Just use them at night. Well, here we've got all these electric vehicles all over the place. And, I had traveled to another part of the country and was riding in a car with a group of guys. And, they've, in a southern state, it was a little bit different, from what we see out here in California. First of all, there's 39 plus million of us out here and cars everywhere. But they were asking me, do you see Teslas all the time? Because it was a little more unique where they were. And, at any given stoplight, you look around, if there's 20 cars there, 6 or 7 of them are going to be Teslas. There's, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 of them in our neighborhood. They're all over the place and always parked in the driveway, always plugged in, using electricity. And we got these quick charge stations all over the place. And yet the governor is demanding that by 2035, no more new gas-powered vehicles be sold. And yet summer rolls around and we can't even run the air conditioner during the day, or they ask that you don't. And, it's interesting because some years ago, the electric companies and also the water companies and the gas company installed new monitoring devices is I guess what I want to call them, where they can be electronically shut off. They don't have to come to your house and shut your power off and lock. I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of for what counts your usage each month. And, they can just shut it off from headquarters. And all of this was installed in preparation for what we're looking at now, for complete control of everything we do. And, you look at communist countries and, where the power only comes on in a high-rise building, or the heat only comes on between certain hours of the day, and the rest of the time you just got to bundle up. Well, the opposite is true here, and especially now that we've seen, in Saudi Arabia and Mecca, at the Hajj, there's over 500 people died because it's 125 degrees. And, you look at what happens here. We don't get anywhere near that hot here in SoCal, but we do get 100 degrees. And when you have no air conditioner and you're unhealthy or whatever the case may be, and you can't run your air conditioner, and yet they're going to force us to go all electric with our vehicles by 2035. It's ridiculous. And yet people keep voting these clowns in office over and over and over. And the only thing I could say to that is, come quickly, Lord Jesus. And this article goes on to say that, the consequences, besides the physical dangers for women who have an abortion, is they experience a range of emotional side effects after an abortion, including depression, thoughts of suicide, feelings of grief, anxiety, lowered self-esteem, regret, sexual dysfunction, avoidance of emotional attachment, flashbacks, substance abuse, and these emotional challenges may manifest immediately after an abortion or gradually after a longer period of time, impacting their spiritual development. And this underscores the need for ongoing emotional and spiritual support and care for post-abortive women. And, this is something the church has a responsibility to do. We are the only ones who are the spiritual caregivers for this world. You can't get spiritual care from a false spiritual group where what they're teaching isn't actual and isn't true. We alone follow after the one who is the way, the truth, and the life. And therefore, we do have a message of hope. And, God forgives anyone who repents. It doesn't matter what you have done. And, I know people that, women that have had multiple abortions, that God has healed and restored, and God uses them in ministry, and they have a great passion for other women. And this is what the church is all about. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And we have, the article says, the responsibility to courageously address the issue of abortion within our congregations and provide a grace-filled, compassionate environment for women to both heal and grow in their faith. We have to remember this indoctrination began long ago in the life of those who are childbearing age women today, in that they've been told it's a clump of cells. It's just fetal tissue. It doesn't become a human being until it breathes air outside the womb, or to a particular stage in development inside the womb, and all these other things. So, they don't look at it. Many don't look at it as taking the life of a child. But, as this article says, something inside of them knows, because they have been made by God. And he front-loaded women with that mothering instinct and all the things that come with that. So, again, just incredible that we have to talk about these things to the degree that we have to talk about them because of how they developed in these last days. Jesus is coming soon. Olive Tree Ministries, Jan Markell, had an article she published this week, and I couldn't agree more. She says the church age is winding down and the world is running out of time. The article says time flies, years race by, but 2024 has been a stunner in many ways. And many events remind me, again, this is Jan writing, that the world is running out of time before the last act of a major drama plays out. In other words, the church age is winding down. She says she has 10 events from this current year that highlight why she is convinced of this. Number one is Israel is alone. And after Israel was brutally attacked in October of 2023, one would have thought the world would rally by her side, but not so. Not even America is now her true ally. The U.S. is withholding weapons and intelligence, and the International Criminal Court wants to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu in May for wanted to arrest him in May for defending his country. And again, like the hostage story, that there may only be 40 who are actually alive and the others are already dead. No talk about that from the International Criminal Court. Number two, the spirit of Antichrist has been loosed on the earth. The headquarters appear to be America. We tell the world how to tear apart college campuses and how to corrupt government ought to work. We even embarrass banana republics by trying to jail former presidents in a style that natives in the rainforest couldn't dream up. Number three, there's a new level of calling good evil and evil good. Hamas is celebrated around the world. Christians are persecuted like never before. Islam is glorified, particularly on college campuses, and those who protest abortions are jailed. The White House and the UN mourn the death of Iran's President Raisi on May 19th, though he bears the moniker the Butcher of Tehran. Number four, she says the world is leaderless. There's not one global leader to whom the world looks. Governments everywhere operate like the Keystone Cops. World War III could easily erupt as a result. The world is unsure of just who is running the White House. Well, the world might be unsure, but I think this is Obama 3.0. The stage is being set for a Mr. Fix-It, whom the world will celebrate. They just want stability and someone in charge to enforce peace and security. Number 5, there's a rush to global government, and strangely, unusual power is being given to the corrupt World Health Organization, who could end up being the leader of the world. They met in May and could use another pandemic to unite the world. The stage was set with COVID, and they have targeted 2025 as a possible timeline. Number 6, artificial intelligence is being refined to rule the world. The goal is that it will be smarter than mankind, and the Antichrist will need this system to run his global kingdom. Even now, Microsoft Copilot AI demands to be worshipped. Technology has gone too far. The animate is godlike. The aberrant, number 7, the aberrant is celebrated as normal and should be the world standard. In the predicted end time decline of man's moral character, we are watching the homosexual and trans movement be hailed and the lovers of biblical values be persecuted and jailed. The sanctity of life is scoffed at. As predicted, mankind lives for money and power at the expense of everyone and anyone. Number 8, too many churches are majoring in minors and furthering unsound doctrine. There are wolves among the flock. Church members hear about their best life now, about being purpose-driven, and about attracting seekers to the church. Sin is avoided. Eschatology, or studying Bible prophecy, is scoffed at and marginalized, and many pulpits are woke. Movements such as the New Apostolic Reformation are ravaging naive, experience-driven young people and indoctrinating millions of people. End-time apostasy is the new normal in the church. Number 9, a new way of doing business is waiting in the wings. It will be cashless. It will be crypto. It will be blockchain so that it tracks your every purchase. It could be in play very soon through brokers, though power brokers may delay it until after the November election. Life with central bank digital currency will cause life as we know it to dramatically change. In other words, they can monitor if you're overweight and you're buying candy, they can cause your card eventually the mark on your hand or forehead, to not allow you to buy such things. Absolute and complete control that the Antichrist is going to someday demand. And number 10, finally, the violence of the days of Noah is upon us. Criminal prosecutions are soaring in some areas by 5,000%. Cities are ravaged by crime. Entire towns are closing down a business district due to theft and lawlessness. Society is on the move, relocating to safe places and states just to lead a more normal life away from the mayhem. It is as though the entire country is the Wild West of the 1880s. I could list 110 markers, Jan went on to say, to watch throughout the balance of 2024, but articles must be short and to the point, and I've been watching the so-called signs of the times for a few decades, and nothing compares to the last 5 to 10 years. Events have been stunning and game-changing, and I couldn't agree more. And Jan closes the article with, this is why sharing the gospel should be the first order of business when it comes to being about our Father's business. Now, our final article for tonight comes from Harbinger's Daily, and I encourage you to check out that website. It's a great website, got a lot of wonderful resources and teaching and prophecy updates and links to them, and I think you'd enjoy having a look at it. It's called Harbinger's Daily. And the article, the headline reads, "The Deadly Fruit of Anti-God Education. Brutal Violence Rises to Crisis Levels. Teachers are under attack, literally. Violent and indoctrinated students in government schools across the United States and beyond are increasingly beating not just each other, but they're beating their teachers, according to a flurry of nationwide reports based on a survey of teachers that found startling levels of violence against educators. And according to the survey of over 8,000 teachers in 34 states, over 70% reported having been subjected to physical violence by a student. Over half of the respondents said that they were attacked more than once or even many times. And various Cox media outlets reported about these findings. The escalating violence is part of a trend that is causing an exodus of teachers and has alarmed policymakers and parents, even those who have not been violently attacked yet. Verbal abuse has been encountered by virtually all of the respondents in the survey. And among those responding to the survey, more than two-thirds said the violence has caused them to consider leaving education. The crisis, as experts are calling it, has become so severe that it is now being discussed in the halls of Congress and state legislatures across the United States. The attacks have included from savage beatings, such as one high schooler in the Ligonier Valley, Pennsylvania, that resulted in a broken jaw, requiring multiple surgeries. WPXI Channel 11 reported on the arrest in another Pennsylvania school after a student punched, choked, and threw on the ground and assaulted 4 teachers in one incident. And one teacher in the Carolinas, who asked not to be named, told WSOC TV that she simply could not take it anymore and had to flee. I would have loved to continue teaching for another 3 or 5 years, but due to the behaviors and the lack of support and the safety issues, I didn't feel safe. I've been kicked. I've been pinched. Students have tried to bite me. I've had bruises on my legs from that, the teacher added, suggesting that the violence against teachers is becoming routine. A student threatened to throw a chair at me. Another colleague was shoved and punched in the stomach. What finally pushed her over the edge was a second grade student threatening to shoot teachers and students, only to come to school a few weeks later with a realistic toy gun. Making matters worse, she said, school administrators did not take the threat seriously, with the child not even being suspended as a result. Well, I heard a very, very startling statistic last week, and that is, listen close, 49.5% of school-aged children today are in therapy. Almost half of school-aged children today are in or have been in therapy. You know, this is where this progressive movement leads to. You know, when there is no structure for kids, when they're allowed to do whatever they want. And, you know, sadly, there's a lot of homes that are practicing woke or progressive parenting where the child, you know, basically is undisciplined and is free to do whatever it wants in order to express themselves, whatever gender they want, whatever activities they want to do. Nothing is withheld from them. And, you know, again, I think this is so interesting, and another component of why I believe that it's so late in the game, and why Jan was exactly right that the church age is coming to a close. And that is because, you know, now we're seeing another generation that will have the attitude of the tribulation earth dwellers that's already manifesting itself in elementary. A second grader was going to bring a gun to school, threatened to bring a gun to school, and nobody did anything about it. And, you know, I mentioned this on Sunday in a message. It just popped in my head. But it was some years ago, probably 20 years ago, there was a group up in, I believe it was Portland. And, you know, they decided that some school board member, somebody drove by, a city official of some kind, I'm pretty sure it's a school board member, drove by and saw at an elementary school children on the playground playing, and the whole playground was fenced in. And this administrator went back and reported that this is so confining to the kids. You know, these fences symbolize control and authority, and, you know, it's very intimidating for the children. We need to pull these fences down. And sure enough, people agreed with her, and they did just that. They pulled the fences down. And the first day that the fences were down, they drove by the playground, and instead of children playing all over, including in the perimeter of the playground where the fence used to be, they found all the children during recess huddled in the center of the field, as far away from where the fences used to be as possible. And, you know, this is the wacky mindset today. Kids need boundaries. They need structure. That fence didn't symbolize bondage. That fence symbolized safety. that you're protected from what's out there that may try and harm you. And, just this foolish ideology that is so dominant in our world today is just moving up the food chain, so to speak, and, beginning to impact another generation. And one more story. I'm sorry, I said the last one was the last one, but this one is the last one because it's the other half of that one, the last one we just reported. And it comes from Ynet News. Now, moving forward, remembering what we just read about the violence and all these things, the mentality of even elementary age students. Ynet News reports that U.S. students say they won't work at Google or Amazon due to Project Nimbus. Over 1,100 students studying technology, engineering, and mathematics from more than 120 universities across the United States signed a pledge this last Tuesday not to accept jobs or internships at Google or Amazon until the companies cease their involvement in Project Nimbus, which provides cloud computing services and infrastructure to guess who? Israel. The signatories include undergraduates and graduate students from Stanford, Berkeley, and the University of San Francisco. No big surprises there. And Amazon and Google are leading employers of graduates from these universities in the field of science and technology. And the petition was organized by No Tech for Apartheid, or NOTA, a coalition of tech workers, Muslim activists, and Jewish Voice for Peace. Amazon and Google are helping to make Israeli apartheid more efficient, violent, and even deadly for Palestinians, the petition said. So again, listen, it is late in the game. Jesus is coming soon. I see that scripturally. It's exciting, even as we watch all the ugly stuff happening in our world. We have much to be expectant of. One day, in a moment, and the twinkling of an eye, we and the dead in Christ, the physical bodies of those who have died through the centuries, they're going to resurrect. We are going to be changed instantaneously into immortal, incorruptible beings. We will maintain the identity that we have now. We will still be who we are as an individual, yet our whole nature, our whole physical body is going to change. For 1 John 3:2 says, when we see him, we'll be like him, for we'll see him as he is. And we will indeed, we won't be God, but we will be immortal and we will be incorruptible like him. And that could happen at any moment. That could happen today, and I sure wish it would. I'm sure you do too. Well, with that said, that's it. I hope you enjoyed getting to see the big boy, as we call him. My wife, Terry, just nicknamed him when we got him early on, and we call him Bubby. Of course, he's Louie, but we call him Bubby, and he just keeps us going. He keeps us laughing. He keeps us sometimes awake. But I so appreciate so many people wanting to know, how's the world's most famous dog doing? And I've mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. I've been all over the world and had people say, how's Louie? Or I love Louie, from literally the other side of this planet. People in Australia, New Zealand, oh, we love Louie. When are you going to bring Louie back on? It's just crazy. But thanks for that. It warms our heart. And again, don't be discouraged. God is on the throne. And, I see this, as I said, I see this floating around out there. The Bible doesn't say God is in control. Well, it may not use those words, but it certainly implies it. And, he may be, and I think we need to be careful about taking a deist approach, as though he set things in order and then just pull back and watch everything happen. I'm glad that that's not true. I'm glad that he who watches over Israel watches over me too, and you also. So it's late in the game. There's no question about it. So keep your eyes on the prize. Lift it up above the moment and circumstances, because again, Jesus is coming for us, I believe, soon. Well, that's it for this week, and thank you again for joining us. And please share this, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that would be greatly appreciated. As I've been talking about, I'm not sure exactly what Google does who owns YouTube, but they've put the crunch on us somehow, and thankfully things are starting to rebound from whatever they did, and but God is good, and we'll continue to speak the truth in love until He comes to get us. So with that said, I'll see you here, there, or in the air.